Hello everyone, welcome once again to another posing session. Today we are going to be going over the Solo Darth Maul figure. Now this first pose we're just going for something simple, using the accessory that comes right out of the box with the little chair there, going off of that scene from the end of Solo when he is talking to Kira. Just something simple from sitting down, but as we go through some of the additional poses that we'll go through in today's video, we'll get a little bit more dynamic, even more dynamic than what he actually did in the movie itself. Similar to what we talked about in some other posing sessions, we talked about using your imagination along with the reference of the movie itself and possibly other inspiration that you see from the character and the history of that character. So sit back, relax, and we will go over a couple different poses today. Alright, going into our next pose. Here is the scene at the end of Solo when he's speaking to Kira, and he uses the Force to have his lightsaber come directly to him. Once again, just modifying a little bit further from that first pose, that simple pose of them sitting there. I mean, it's really just raising that arm up, adding the lightsaber to that clenched fist in that case. And the great thing about this particular figure is that it is a DX figure, which in those cases comes with the rolling eyes, where you can change the position of the eyes of that particular figure. So that way, not only can you get that head tilt in order to add a little character, but you can also change the position of his eyes to add a little more menace to his face, especially to a character like Darth Maul. So even a pose as simple as this can add a lot of character to your shelf and add a lot of dynamic images to what people are seeing when you have that figure on your shelf. You can see as it's coming around here, we're just getting from all the different angles just to show you where you can go. And the great thing about this figure, as well as the cloth costume that he's wearing, does allow for a lot of great movement and not a lot of restriction. Jumping into our next pose here, pose number 3. Now, taking away that chair that he was using and standing him up. Once again, just a simple museum pose here, just a straight up and down pose, igniting that lightsaber. Now, this pose is just a way, it's not very dynamic, of course, once again, a museum pose, but it does allow you to get kind of the pieces of the figure, see the different angles. From that case, something simple of him standing there with that ignited lightsaber, just so that we can have a starting point to work off of as we start getting into some of those more dynamic poses as we continue along in our video today. So just starting off with this simple pose here, standing up, and then we'll start getting into some of those more dynamic poses building off this initial standing still museum pose. On to our next pose here, pose number 4. Adjusting a little bit further from our previous pose here, now adding both of his hands to that ignited lightsaber. Adding the hood to there. The great thing about this costume that is on this particular figure is that there is little tiny wires that are built into the different pieces of the hood and to some of the kind of flowing pieces of his cloak. So that does allow you to not only pose the figure at its particular joints, whether it be its hands, the elbows, the knees, its head, of course, but also posing the pieces of the clothing as well to give you that more kind of like natural flowing look to the cloak depending on what pose the figure currently is in. And once again, you're seeing here that you can pose the eyes as well on this figure, giving you that close-up of that along with the position of his body language. So talking about body language again, what direction is he moving in? What is he on the attack? Is he in a defensive type of pose? What is he doing in this case? With the hood being over, it's a little bit more of a secretive type of look. We're getting a little bit closer for this particular pose, looking at the specifics of the belt here, looking at the specifics of those hands holding the lightsaber, along with his Crimson Dawn necklace there as well. That's all different ways that you can pose and use the flowing of that costume to show movement. We're going to get a little closer here on the feet, just so you can see the detail that Hot Toys has put into this particular figure. You can see those mechanical legs. Since this is Darth Maul, later on after he returns, post-Clone Wars, in between the prequel and the original trilogy, so you have those mechanical legs there as well, and it's great detail put in there by Hot Toys. Now getting into our most dynamic pose so far, but once again using the building blocks of the poses that we've gone over so far to build onto our next pose here. Now, using what we've talked about before with building your character, building your body language, and using all the different articulation options that you have available on that figure to convey those different items. So you can see here that no matter how subtle it may be in certain cases, we're using all those different articulation features. So we're using the articulation there in the shoulders, the arms, the hands, switching out the hands to give him that force push with his arm outstretched in those cases, with his lightsaber behind him right after in the middle of a battle, using that twist of his waist to give him that movement. And then also, once again, tilting his head ever so slightly there to the position, showing that eye position of where his eyes are focusing on the opponent that he's using that force push on. Once again, using the wonderful feature here on a DX figure to move those eyes to not only move the head position, but also changing the eye position to give that eyesight line in a perfect direction to really convey the action that is happening in this scene. Really adding a dynamic feature to the presentation of this figure when it's presented on your shelf. Now we come to the final pose of today's video, once again building off those building blocks from our previous pose. This is more of a resting type of dynamic pose. In the middle of battle, at the end of battle, him striding forward with his legs, resting the lightsaber there at his side, using the movement of the pieces of fabric that you can change on his costume, and the language of his body where he's twisted to the side there. He's still looking over at where his opponent used to be and kind of contemplating there for a moment on the middle of that battle. Now, the other kind of focus of this pose is the articulation in the legs, which we will see here, where you can see that those legs do have multiple points of articulation, which is a great feature of him having those mechanical legs, and you can see all the specific detail that Hot Toys put into that figure to allow you to get some really dynamic poses when it comes to his legs. And you don't need to really worry about harming the figure by keeping it in these types of poses for long periods of time due to the cloth on those figures and the plastic. So you can keep a figure like this in a pose like this or any of our other previous poses for a very long time without worrying about damaging that figure. And you can play around, use your imagination, use some reference tools from the movies, from other 1/6 scale collectors, and let your mind go wild when it comes to these figures. Use them as a tool for your creativity and for a great way to display and have a wonderful item there for you to show in your collection room or anywhere you'd like to display them. So if you like this video, keep an eye out for future videos. Please like and subscribe, and we are more than happy to continue to offer some additional 1/6 scale and other pop culture collectible videos coming up in the future. Thank you so much for watching today, and keep on collecting.